So our next speaker is James Jody Neel, leading spectrum sharing researcher, senior technologist at Federated Wireless. At Federated Wireless, he's led the development of prototypes for a wide range of scenarios, including 3GPP, radar spectrum sensing, overseas spectrum sharing, AWS-3 spectrum sharing. He holds numerous patents in areas of spectrum sharing, 3GPP network customization, was a board member of the Wireless Innovation Forum, and was chair of our cognitive radio work group. And his talk today is on the UK DSIT Sandbox, which slides I will be putting on the computer momentarily.
Very good, or at least 1 out of 3. So DSIT, Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, out of the UK. So this was very much international spectrum sharing for the International Spectrum Sharing Workshop. And there was a press release put out in March-ish about it, and said, hey, we've done some spectrum sharing in the UK, and we've done some stuff building off the CBRS protocols. And so then Andy sent out an email saying, hey, wouldn't it be nice if the WInnForum member that was doing that would actually come talk about it? So here I am today, and I'll caveat that the DSIT Spectrum Sharing Sandbox, there were 3 awards, 3 different projects on that, tackling different aspects of spectrum sharing. So one of which went to Real Wireless. They were the lead on that, leading a consortium of companies. Qualcomm was part of their group, and they were doing sharing an upper 6 gig, trying to do a signaling protocol between Wi-Fi and mobiles so they could share that efficiently. There was another one from the University of Durham with, again, a consortium of companies there. And they were focused on kind of a more traditional distributed DSA application to local access licenses and shared access licenses. And you're going to say, what on earth are those? And I say, wait until I have slides so you can remember what I'm saying. And then there was a third project, which by leaving for last is obviously the best project because we were working on it. That was led by Queen Mary University of London, but other team members on there were Telet Research and Aetha Consulting. And we did applications of CBRS to improve spectrum sharing in the UK in the local access licensing bands and the shared access licensing bands. So that went from March 2024 to March 2025. And it's kind of wrapped up, but if you guys really hate yourselves and want to get up bright and early in the morning on June 3rd, there's going to be another round of presentations of what went on in the DSIT sandboxes held by the UK Spectrum Policy Forum. I say because you really hate yourself because it's going to be in the morning UK time. So offset 5 hours is going to start at 4 a.m. So if you guys want to, you can learn even more. I'll have a link to that up later. So, all right. So what am I going to talk about with regards to this? So I will go through quickly a little bit about the UK spectrum sharing sandboxes because I've just talked to it. And then I will go through what our sandbox was, what we were trying to solve specifically, and broadly, how do we do it? And then what I thought would be of most interest for this audience is, well, what do we do to do something like CBRS, but not CBRS in these bands? So, and if I could have one takeaway message, and I think every talk should have a message to remember from, is CBRS is great. It works in CBRS. You can apply to other things by changing out fields and doing some fairly simple extensions. And that's what we did here. It's not the solution for everything. It's not going to be real quick reactions necessarily, but here where we needed, reactions on the order of days, great. So, all right. So, iCharts. So I will talk to it without reading. And I think you guys get copies of the slides so you can read in detail all the little tiny font that I put up there that I slapped together slides on the plane. So no time to make things more professional. So that's DSIT's language. What were they trying to do? They wanted to foster innovation in spectrum sharing in the UK, and they specifically wanted to have test beds. They wanted to have actual prototypes to go through and try things out They were working closely with Ofcom to allow you to have experimental licenses to do almost whatever you wanted to do. They had a focus, however, on the 6 gig band, which they've been doing the AFC proceedings on, and also 3.8 to 4.2, which is an SAL band, which has been one of the more adopted or used sharing bands, but still nowhere near the order of CBRS. And within that, they wanted every project to kind of do three things. One, make a prototype, define what your mechanism is, see if it works. So everybody had to do that. Thing two, well, that's nice that you did a prototype. You only have so much time, so much money. Can you do some simulation studies to consider what ifs? What if you did this across the entire country? You don't have the prototyping budget to go out and do that, but you can simulate it. And then work package 3 was focused on economic and regulatory aspects of it. So you have this new spectrum sharing mechanism. Is it worthwhile doing anything with? I will say one of ours is probably not worth doing, but that's unofficial. If you go to the talk earlier in the morning that for masochism reasons on the 3rd, they'll say it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it's just not enough uptake or value for the LAL sharing as it currently is. So those are the 3 different entities that got awards. I talked through that. We're going to talk a little about LALs and SALs. And so who were the players? Who's who in the zoo? So Telet Research and Federated Wireless were responsible for the prototyping and mechanism design. So surprise, we made a DSA server. So which is my generic term for a SAS or AFC or anything else in which you have radios going and pinging and asking, can I please transmit here or not? But we also use that to support the nationwide simulation. So, hey, we've got a server in the cloud. You can hit us as much as you want, and we can give as many answers as you want. So that's how we were doing the nationwide simulation studies. And then that everybody had a hand in terms of providing inputs to Aetha in terms of regulatory impacts and economic impacts. And what if we we're able to decrease protections by 3 dB? How much would that make a difference in terms of overall capacity? Not that much. But if you did synchronization and coexistence, more. But I'm not going to go through that today. I'm going to primarily focus on the mechanism. So we ended up focusing on 2 bands because limited time, limited money. Band 3 for LALs, local access licenses. I'll talk about that more in a second. And then N77 and 3.8 to 4.2, which is where SALs are used the most. So I don't need that animation. So I've used terms which I assume is not familiar with the US audience, so let's define those terms. All right, so what is a shared access license or a SAL? If you know Federated Wireless, you know Sal Dietrich. He loved this project to death in our previous project because we were all about making SALs more economically valuable. So the way that works, originally and is slightly updated via licensing platform evolution, which I'll have a link to that later, is yes. Fill out a form, you send an email off to Ofcom, and you say, here's what I'm thinking of doing. Will you allow me to do it? And then their engineers will go off and transcribe what you wrote on a sheet of paper or an email and put it into their system. And for a bit of UK humor, come back a month later and say, computer says no. Actually, putting a little more color behind that, there were a number of early users of the SAL spectrum in which they would apply for access. Ofcom would tell them no, not provide any reason why. And we had made a tool under a previous project called 5G New Thinking when there were still DCMS, of which the technology part spun out into DSIT, where we just made a quick go online, find out if you're able to use Spectrum here or not tool, just kind of made it freely available. And they were able to do that, and we would tell you who you were interfering with, which Ofcom didn't have at that time. And found out they were interfering with themselves. So Ofcom had come back and told them no explanation. And then they went back and said, look, Federated is telling us we're interfering with yourself. You should let us do this. And they said, oh, wait, you're right. So I found that out at a conference. So it was a nice thing that Phil, that we actually did something useful. A lot of these are prototypes that go and sit in a warehouse, Indiana Jones style. So different bands have different available bandwidths, slight variations in terms of rules, some in terms of access. You have some similarities in terms of CBRS in terms of what you have to protect. So there is at 3.8 to 4.2, there's the National Broadband Network, which they won't tell you where anything is, but they just kind of block out a block of spectrum. That's being updated in the LPE to make that a little more meaningful. You had to protect satellite earth stations. You had to protect fixed links. You have to protect DoD sites, some radio astronomy sites. Sounds like a lot like CBRS. So it was nice and easy for us to code up the protections over there for that. It was also nice that while Ofcom was just taking in your application, whether via mail or via email, and going off and doing the things, they had published all the rules and calculations, so we could just go through and directly implement it, and then go back through and have meetings and validate that we'd done it correctly. But we did that on our previous project. Now, this is their success story. They've had about 1,000 successful licenses. So, you know, they're smaller than the US, call about 1/6 the size, but, you know, 420,000. I guess Andy's going to be giving numbers later. So I didn't look it up before I got over here. But orders and orders of magnitude less than what you might expect for very similar bands, similar 3GPP support. And it's partially because the process is cumbersome and not necessarily that efficient. Then they kind of blocked out the national MNOs, which, you know, if you want to prioritize private networks and building up an ecosystem, that's great, but MNOs need spectrum too. So that was kind of a policy decision, and it kind of is what it is. And they initially had complete assumptions there'll be absolutely no synchronization whatsoever, so they're doing worst case, and those are numbers from November. So this is what the distribution of sites are for SALs around the UK. The light blue are low power, the dark blue are medium power, so different levels. And what Ofcom found is, even though there was only 1,000 or so sites deployed around the country, there were large portions of the country which you could not get spectrum anymore. That's what that black area is. They call it sterilized, that it's completely unusable for wireless life or any more wireless life at that point. So back last fall, and then with rules sort of defined off of that, they said, we're going to allow synchronization. If you apply for access and you don't get access, and we tell you who you would be interfering with, please go off and coordinate amongst yourselves and send us a report later that you have an agreement. And if you send us that agreement, then we'll let you in. So completely manual, painful, but it is what it is. So if you want to read more about that, that's the user-led coordination out of the December 2024 coordination document. So what is a local access license? All right, so that is in theory up to a 3-year license to go out and transmit an unused MNO spectrum. So what is unused MNO spectrum? That's a good question. They didn't define that. That was up to the MNO to define what are they not using. Not only was it what are they not using now, what would they not be using in that 3-year period, which everybody wants to build out. So how do you define future? How do you ensure that? So, and then MNOs got nothing out of letting other people use their spectrum. So why would they make it easy to go through? So I can list every LAL on the screen. It's an eye chart, but that's not that many. That's all of them. So even though it's an eye chart, for your reading later, one thing I like to emphasize in spectrum sharing is beyond the immediate applications you think of, there's other applications that may come out of it. So a lot of WInnForum stuff shares spectrum with the DoD. The ones I've highlighted, that's all MOD use. So UK DoD. It's not their spectrum, but they're not their original incumbent operations. It was EE. If you can not possibly read that font size, I'm having a problem from here. But they have 4 different deployments. And then the other ones that I have highlighted there, that's Telet. So they like to say that they have the most LAL uses of anybody in the UK. But if you look, they're all in band 3. So if you're wondering why we did band 3, that's why we did band 3. So, all right, and if you want, there's a link to where that comes from. All right, so what kind of problems were we trying to address in our project, which I've kind of set up a little bit? So how can you get access to that unused MNO spectrum, and how do you know it's unused? All right, so there is in the UK an Ofcom managed site called the Mobile Coverage Checker. It's nice. It'll tell you everywhere as a user where you can get 3G, 4G, or 5G service all over the UK. It's good for that, good for consumer. Not good for spectrum sharing because it doesn't tell you anything about the band. So if you have a MNO with multiple licenses across multiple different bands, who knows what they're using? There's also been other things in the past in which apparently the UK at one point had a problem with anti-5G terrorists setting bombs and traps at the sites of 5G towers. So they have a strong rule against providing that information in a public way. Might be able to get an NDA to do it, might be able to get coverage maps, but it's just not going to be there immediately. So how do you get that information? And that's just current. So how do you go about figuring out, hey, the MNO that you're using their spectrum for, they've built out and they've not been wanting to coordinate anyways. So how do you know that they're there? So similar to the WInnForum problem of, at least originally, you had DoD users, radars, that didn't want to tell you where they were so they wouldn't get possibly a missile dropped on their carrier. Somewhat understandable, but I've heard Preston, who I think I saw outside, go off once on, I know exactly where all of those are by following public websites. But nonetheless, incumbents frequently don't have a strong incentive to help. So you have to at least bootstrap this with a way that you can figure out availability without help. Although help is always better, hence TARDIS. Want to also streamline access. So I didn't hit on the slide before, but LALs can take you a year if that works out. SALs, a month is the happy day scenario. 3, 4, 5 months is more. Well, that was the common timeline. It's down to more a month, month and a half with LPE, which I may talk about later. I'll at least have a line to it. So needed some way to get you assignments quickly. WInnForum, CBRS. We have Google has tools, Federated has tools. We'll tell you what spectrum's available. And then I flagged that SAL congestion problem, that even with only 1,000 sites in the UK, the entire Midlands is just full up for use. So if you can go ahead and start implementing the user-based spectrum coordination in an automated fashion, like you do with the coexistence groups in CBRS and OnGo, then that'll help that tremendously. The other thing that we were concerned with, which is different, is an LAL spectrum. If you want to pack in tighter, you should be coordinated as well. But again, you got to assume they're not going to tell you. And also, there's a lot of grandfathered systems. Never had that happen before in the SAL that don't have to go back through and re-coordinate with you if they don't have to. They could. It'd be nice of them, but they don't necessarily have to. So grandfather systems. And then seeing how going in, we didn't think there was going to be a $1 billion opportunity in this. You wanted to minimize the regulatory impact and the ecosystem impact. So hence, minimize the ecosystem impact. If you have something like CBRS, take it over existing clients more or less and substitution to similar DSA servers, that'd be great. And it's any regulatory process that doesn't have a strong, we need billions of dollars behind it is not going to happen. So you want to have a very small footprint, very small impact to what Ofcom is doing as well. So this slide I took over from another briefing without modifying. So I have stuff on here that I'm not going to talk about. If you want to ask me about it later, some of it relates more to simulation studies and economic studies and so forth. So how are we going about accessing follow MNO spectrum? So we have a server determinant. Okay, so we're federated. That's of course our answer, but that is what we came into the project proposing to do. All right, so we do that with aggregate interference protection models. So we're doing that pallet protection area sort of style if we have known coverage areas. All right, then we don't have a network of ESCs, nor will we build out a network of ESCs for this because there's not the economic value proposition for that. But it's not that big of a burden to say, RAN, if you want to operate here, you can at least go through and sense to see if the incumbent is already there or if they're popping up later. So it's RAN-based sensing, which, hey, that might be something useful for 3.1 to 3.4 too. At least it's something to study. So it's other applications beyond the immediate LAL spectrum sharing. Then streamlining access. DSA servers are great for that, for telling you you can operate here or not operate here. Particularly when there's only 1,000 systems. That's not much of a scaling problem at all. And then still have a DSA client that may be managing one site or multiple sites as a proxy, same kind of concepts. Then I'll talk more about that third bullet in a moment, so I won't steal my thunder. TDD synchronization, that's kind of straightforward, but in addition, the second bullet on that one, I will mention in passing that if you set up your sensing mechanism for incumbents in the right way, then you get an enforcement mechanism for free. So if you're going through and trying to recover PLMNs and PCIs and reporting those, and you know your own systems, you can figure out is somebody grabbing more spectrum than they should because the footprint is extended beyond where it should be detectable. I'm going to ignore the realistic coverage for now, and the interference assumptions and the propagation steering, because those were all simulation things. So just tweaking parameters for the sharing out mechanisms. So this is kind of an architecture. Should look similar because I kind of lightly adapted it from the WInnForum reference architecture. For what was going on is you have a DSA server or servers sitting somewhere up in the cloud, and they're talking to clients, CBRS clients, DSA clients for generalization here. All right, and they may be controlling one or more different sites. All right, and we're going to be doing TDD synchronization amongst the secondary users. But, oops, sorry. This is why if I'd had time, I could have practiced and not gotten ahead of my animations in the way I was talking. In addition to TDD synchronizations, with the secondary users, we're also taking the same sensing that are figuring out what TDD parameters other users are having and applying it to the MNOs or to legacy or grandfathered SAL sites. So the first thing that popped up, if I had practiced this before I got up here, I would have made certain I hit it first. But flight, cab, lots of pain the last couple of days, is that we're directly adapting the SAS to CBSD protocol for this. So as well as some of the on-go coexistence group management. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But it means that we end up having the same architecture, effectively the same protocol, whether it's SAL or LAL. And in theory, maybe it goes to others. I mean, well, all we really tested out here is LAL and SALs, but it's multiple bands, different rules, very different kinds of licensing, different protections. So it seems like it should be able to extend to others. All right, so minimizing regulatory impact. That was something that wasn't addressed in the previous two slides. How do we go about doing that? So first, we didn't change the SAL, LAL licenses at all. All right, so you go through, you still apply for, under the mechanism that we studied and proposed, you would go through and still get your LAL license, your SAL license, but you don't get an assignment. We're breaking apart the SAL and LAL assignment process. So what that means is you get a license that says you are able to operate an SAL in some band, TBD, as long as you can say what bands you're willing to accept ahead of time, in this general geographic region. We would be perfectly happy if it was nationwide, but there was a UK decision to not enable nationwide networks in these bands, so assuming that it's still geographically constrained. So in that setup, Ofcom still issues licenses to your secondary operators, and presumably they've authorize and go through whatever approval process for DSA servers. But with a license, an authorized DSA server can issue assignments to the operator's base stations. Cute little diagram that I once spent an hour making, which shouldn't have. So splitting apart assignment and licensing. What that means is that we're also for LALs, and we're calling this DSA-enabled LAL and DSA-enabled SAL, which I didn't expand in here, but that's what the DSAL and DLAL means. So now you don't have to go through and coordinate with the MNO. You get your assignment directly from the server as long as you have a license to operate and where you're asking for spectrum is consistent with your license to operate. SALs under the existing rules have a first come first serve or prioritization to the first ones who are in, so incumbency, right of incumbency to access. And that doesn't have the need to rapidly evacuate spectrum, partially because of that. There's nobody, if you get your SAL license, nobody can tell you to get out other than Ofcom. And they tell you that you'll have at least a month to take any corrective action or get out. So in addition to the more machine-based sort of things, we also in this setting like to talk about automate it to the engineer, where rather than automate it to the device, engineer can hop on a terminal, call it sort of like a certified professional installer, and go through and put in the specs and then go off and configure the device, and then every now and then get an email saying, yep, you're still good. That's what you can do if you don't have a DSA client. Still easy to do a DSA client, but not everybody would have been in that situation. So we covered that too. A slight variation depending upon how you view the differences between 3550 to 3650 and 3650 to 3700 is that we're explicitly multi-jurisdiction in that you have LALs and SALs, and it's the same protocol. So we're multi-jurisdiction. So your license tells us that you're providing some reference to on your request for spectrum, what you're actually allowed to use, and based off of that, we go off and do the calculation. Our server was set up for, but we never did a prototype with it. You could be asking for LAL or SAL spectrum and taking whichever one works best for you in that setting. But then, if you can, the more important takeaway here off of that is, if you take the CBRS protocol in general and you've attached licensing terms or some other jurisdictional identifier, you could have a common protocol across many different bands, many different locations. So think big WInnForum. All right, so measurement reports. So that's how we're doing the sensing, because we're not putting out ESCs for this. The measurement reports are built around being able to report back PLMNs and PCIs so that things are deployed the way that they're supposed to be, and also when you register and use spectrum or acknowledge the grant assignment, you're telling us what are you going to be sending over the air, in effect, for everyone else to check what you're doing. So that way, if we get a report that it's from this one, we can look it up and say, oh, they've done a bad thing. We need to maybe go tattle to Ofcom, or maybe do something else with the system to adjust them from an enforcement perspective. But PLMNs are known, easy to correlate with the MNO networks outside of some private network overlap where they all like to use the same PLMN. So we have ignored that because it's a prototype. The other requirement there was that because you don't know where the MNOs have built out and they may change what they're doing, you have to measure, survey your area before you can start using so. But we also want regular measurements after that because they build out. We don't have this running on the tight WInnForum 5-minute, although inland, different thing now. But once a day, I'm sure Max can tell me otherwise, but if you're bringing up a site, it's not going to be up and active in under a day. It's going to be some testing and so forth, but That was our assumption. But, so, and then what on earth is the server doing with sensing results? CBRS, sensor triggers. There's an area defined for that. All right. Well, how do we define an area here since we've got RANs and random locations? So it may not be the best solution, but it is a solution, and it seems to work okay for what we did in our very limited experiment so far. Is we associated it with census areas, census output areas, and that's trying to keep the same population size. So that meant that we're implicitly getting variation in population density, which also influence transmit power when other folks are building out networks. It correlates, may not be perfect. So that if you get, so that what the table on the right is saying is if you get a measurement that says that it's absolutely certain that nobody's transmitting on this band, or nobody protected is transmitting on the band, then we assume that whole census OA is available. If it's somebody is there then we thought that it was available, then we remove that output area from our protected coverage map. And then there's also a threshold which is taken from Ofcom's definition of you are providing meaningful service, that -105 dB. That's not, we didn't just pull it out of the air, it's Ofcom's number. Could argue for a different threshold, doesn't make a difference to the algorithms, but that's where it came from. All right, so that's kind of high level what we did. I can pull up documents and go through fields and stuff, but that didn't seem appropriate for an afternoon talk. So summary of things, we made a prototype. Hey, it'll sense and avoid. We recreated XG. So that's one way of saying a lot of the core concepts for spectrum sharing are old, and a lot of it's still just building out software and getting regulatory buy-in. So summary. So DSIT funded 3 experiments. We were one of them. All right, and we were focused specifically on adapting CBRS techniques and mechanisms to enable better use of the UK spectrum sharing bands. I think with relatively light effort, you could do similar things in other bands and other places wherever there's a need for some kind of dynamic behavior, which you don't always have necessarily in shared bands. And then if you want to hear more, I will not be the one talking, I will be the one sleeping. But there will be more at the UK Spectrum Policy Forum event on June 3rd. There's a link. And then Ofcom is also supposed to be giving a briefing on updates they're making to the SAL process. I have no idea what those are. So I will read slides later myself. So questions, Max?
Given all the work that we've done in the US, and you're familiar with that, you work with Federated, and given the fact that, even in the US, we have a problem with economy of scale and getting everything to pay for itself. Smaller countries like Britain, France, Germany, whatever, if they don't band together and create a common set of rules or whatever, is there any hope that spectrum sharing can be economically viable in a country, say, as small as UK or France or whatever? I mean, what's the economy of scale and like, is it really doable, for a country that small? Curious what you think.
Trying to figure out what I can say because I was part of that analysis. So yes, as long as things are close and you're able to reuse significantly, which is what you're going after. We filed comments with Ofcom on the AFC 6 gig. I don't remember what's in there versus what I wrote. So if you want a better answer to what Federated would say, it's there. So, but the core takeaway is agreeing with your premise that you need scale across multiple jurisdictions. But part of that, going back to my talk to my own horn, is to the extent you can keep the same protocol and adjust the protections in the background, then that helps.
Not trying to reinvent the wheel.
They've said they are. So we'll see.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Kobe.
What sort of surprises did you encounter, and, certainly downsides, but were there any surprising opportunities that you hadn't, or your team had not considered prior to getting underway?
The biggest surprise was how long it took Telet to get equipment. They were able to start prototyping effectively in month 10 of the 12-month project. So so we got it to work in 2 months. So although we had the server ready, a few months in, because lightly adapt what we already do. So that was the biggest surprise. And that's not really what you're going after, but that was my biggest surprise.
So basically what you're saying is that you were able to recreate XG in 2 months.
Yes, we have that power. But
Where's Preston?
it's much harder to do that much harder to do it the first time than I don't know the 103rd time.
Fair enough.
Upside surprise. I mean, the light amount of MNO usage in band 3, which around Bath, which is where Telet was located, was less than I expected, but exactly as much as Telet expected. But they are there all the time. Yeah, I think that'll probably be it.
Thank you.
Any last questions before we go on to our last speaker? Go ahead, Manisha.
You mentioned about TDD synchronization, right?
Yeah.
So were you trying to synchronize everything? Is that correct?
Within groups.
Within groups?
Yeah.
And so if you had a user who for whatever reason wanted or needed a totally different TDD sync, and could you determine if this entity would interfere and would allow that to happen? How did you handle, one-off cases where people needed different kind of TDD?
I will answer how we handled it on paper.
Okay.
Because with the equipment showing up at month 10, the TDD sync wasn't prototype, and it's more of a scale question which you're asking as opposed to a prototype question, anyways. So it was we were using a greatest good metric. All right. So if you're showing up and we can't fit you in, then so be it. That's also Ofcom's existing SAL rule, in that if you cannot find emailing around the synchronization that allow you in, then you can't get in. So they start off with, if you're allowed in, if you're allowed in unsynchronized, all right, and then if you're not allowed in, then you're allowed to go off and find a synchronization mechanism by which you would be allowed in. So similar sort of thing. Now, we have stuff on this project that we didn't really test, but it's there, in which we would reshuffle to try to make space when you're doing your coexistence group request. You say, I can do this and this and this. I really prefer this, and you try to honor that as best as possible. But we have something to shuffle as well. Have you tried it on this? No. So if you can't, so going back through the sequence of how that would be handled on this, separating it from WInnForum stuff. First, can you get in unsynchronized? Easy. Synchronized when we handle it. If you can fit into existing group, great, that's what we do. All right, if you can't fit into a group, then we try to shuffle. That doesn't work, then sorry.
Okay, well, with that, I think we'll move on to our last speaker. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you.